Hello, my name is Mohan Kelkar, and in this video, I want to talk about the prosperity which is created by the presence of fossil fuels. In the previous video, I showed how the poverty in the world decreased as the fossil fuel consumption increased. I want to look at the information in a different way. If you look at the fossil fuel consumption over the last 250 years, you could see that the consumption started slowly increasing in about 1800 and it really picked up the speed in 1950. And there is a significant increase in the fossil fuel consumption starting in 1950. There is almost a linear relationship between the growth in the population and the world fossil fuel consumption, as evident from the line which I have drawn here. Although it's not a perfect straight line, the relationship between population and increase in the population and the fossil fuel consumption is clear. As we started consuming more fossil fuel and became accessible, the world population also increased very rapidly. However, in addition to the population growth, you also see a growth in the GDP or gross domestic product in the world. As you could see that in trillions of dollars, the GDP has gone from close to zero when the fossil fuel consumption was zero to about 120 trillion US dollars in 2011 US dollars. This is a big increase, but is it an increase just because the population has grown? We can normalize this GDP by dividing by the population to calculate the GDP per capita or GDP per person. And you can look at this relationship of GDP per capita versus the world fossil fuel consumption. You almost see a linear relationship again. Between 1950, when the GDP per capita or the amount of money per human was about $4,000, and now it is close to $16,000, almost 300% increase compared to 1950 when the fossil fuel consumption picked up. So there is a very strong relationship between how the GDP in the world has increased per individual and the fossil fuel consumption. So fossil fuel not only has added more people on the planet, but it also has increased the prosperity of the people almost linearly. Now, this linear growth is not uniform. Clearly, there are some countries where the gross domestic product is much higher as the consumption of the fossil fuel has increased. And there are countries, especially in Africa, where the gross domestic product is lagging. Unless the African countries also have the access to the hydrocarbon consumption or fossil fuel consumption, their growth is not going to increase as fast. So if you want to uplift the people who live in relatively poor countries, the only way you can increase their ability to increase the gross domestic product is by providing them relatively cheap supply of energy. When we look at the energy transition, we have to remember one important difference. In the past energy transitions, we always added a new energy source to the existing energy sources. So we started with perhaps coal, then we included oil, then included natural gas, and then nuclear energy. So every time there was a demand for energy, we added a new energy source. The proposed energy transition involves substituting for reliable sources with intermittent sources. So you want to replace the fossil fuels with solar and wind. This type of energy transition is incredibly difficult, and the consequences of that energy transition can be increase in the poverty or reduction in the rate at which we are increasing the GDP in the world. Thank you for listening to my presentation. If you like the presentation, please subscribe to my channel.